This is Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. Stay tuned for today's program. It's very interesting. Dr. Charles Fenzi is with me. He's the Chief Medical Officer and Chief Executive Officer at the Santa Barbara Neighborhood Clinics. We talk a lot about COVID-19, probably stuff that you've been wondering, like when can you touch your face again? We're going to get to that. Good Life is next. This is Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. I'm pleased to have Dr. Charles Fenzi with me today. Dr. Fenzi is the Chief Executive Officer and also still the Chief Medical Officer, yes, correct? At Santa Barbara Neighborhood Clinics. Reading about Dr. Fenzi was actually fascinating. He has a long history in medicine, including a lot of experience working with vulnerable populations, and I want to talk about that today. He's for 30 years, he was a primary care physician before coming to Santa Barbara, where he's been for 8 years at the Santa Barbara Neighborhood Clinic. He was honored as Family Physician of the Year and received the President's Award of the New Mexico chapter of the American Academy of Family Physicians. And then he came to Santa Barbara, and where he's been at the Neighborhood Clinic and most recently adding CEO to his title. So I wanted to start with you, Dr. Fenzi, about kind of the why in terms of you being in medicine and specifically your desire to serve what is referred to here as vulnerable populations. What is that, or what's inside of you that led you to that path?
That's a really hard question, actually, because probably the first experience I had was when in New Mexico, in Roswell, this little town in Roswell, we took turns taking care of whoever didn't have a doctor in the emergency room.
Okay.
And so I was called up one day when it was my week to be on that. And the first young man to come out of San Francisco with HIV was in the hospital. And so it was my turn to take him, and this was before we had any medicines.
Wow.
And so this young guy, William was his name, William Sharp, I just sort of saw him through because we had nothing to offer except comfort. And that was an amazing experience for me. William was a delightful young man. It was such a pleasing experience for me to be part of that.
Huh.
That we decided that maybe is something I needed to continue doing. And then all of a sudden AZT came out, and I had to get smart. I had to learn something.
Wow. And so you've tracked really this 30 years
the epidemic
of HIV. What has that been like? And
well, it's now a chronic disease. So now there are medicines that have extended the life expectancy of that horrible disease.
Yeah.
So that now it's considered to be a chronic disease.
Wow.
And
so it's actually changed.
That's a huge change. And the medicines now, in the old days with the quote cocktail,
right, you
had to be careful you didn't take this medicine with this medicine because they interfere with each other. And this one upset your stomach, and this one made you poop more, and there were all these things you had to worry about, and all these side effects. And people, it was tough to do.
Yeah.
And people, because they were dedicated to helping themselves, did it. Now, it's a pill or two.
Wow.
And it's once a day.
Isn't that amazing?
And you get your CD4 count, that's your lymphocyte count, to the right place, and you're good to go.
Wow. I remember where I was in 1991 when I found out that Magic Johnson had HIV. I was in high school, and he was my favorite player. Mm-hmm. And when that happened, the sense was it was a death sentence.
It was.
I mean, and it was.
It was.
So 1991, that's 29 years ago. At that point in time, if you got that diagnosis, it was about comfort? I mean, it was about...
That's what it was. It was, because it was a terminal illness.
Yeah.
It was like having a terminal cancer. And so what you did is you kept them comfortable.
Wow.
And when William was 20, he was 18 when I first met him.
Wow. And what happened to him?
And he died.
He died.
He died after about 2 years. He lost a lot of weight.
It's amazing to me with medicine. I mean, I think about, so we had a brain injured daughter. She had a stroke in the womb, and she had, the reason they've figured out that she had a stroke in the womb was her head was enlarging because the fluid was building up because of the hemorrhaging, I guess.
Yes.
You know more about this than I do. But because of shunt technology, we got her out. They installed the shunt. We had a couple little things early on, but now she's 18. We've never had a shunt revision. And I'm thinking, that shunt, somebody invented that shunt.
A little tube.
That kids, and I've heard about this, kids that, especially in other countries, just die of hydrocephalus. They just, and that may have been the case for us 30, 50 years ago. You know what I mean?
That's right.
So our lives are deeply impacted by medicine and medical technology. Would you say?
I had a friend in Roswell who was a neurosurgeon, amazing man, incredibly skilled, and he decided to go and do a missionary trip to Kenya.
Huh.
And he was driving down the road, automobile accident, head injury, blood coming out of his ears, and he knew how to fix that guy, but did not have the equipment to do it.
Is that right?
And had to watch this young man die.
Oh.
And that was heartbreaking for him.
Yeah. Wow. It's amazing. I mean, I think that's such a gift.
We don't know how fortunate we are to have
Yes.
access to that kind of technology.
Yeah, it's really amazing. Tell us, just for somebody who's watching who has never been to the neighborhood clinics, tell us just kind of about what Santa Barbara Neighborhood Clinic is. And then I want to get to the vision and kind of the campaign and where you're headed. But just talk about kind of the neighborhood clinics today.
So, the very first impression that I have of the clinics is the one I have every single morning when I go in there. The first thing that happens when I go into any one of our clinics is the smiling faces of my staff. The staff in these clinics are just incredible.
Yeah.
So we're sitting here in the midst of this pandemic.
Yeah.
And these people are showing up. They're finding they are wives, they are husbands, they are mothers or fathers.
Yeah.
And they're coming to work and leaving their spouse to take care of these children that then when they get home, tired after doing all this work, they then have to take care of and cook for, and and these are just amazing people. So we start with that.
Yeah.
That's the group that you deal with.
Yeah.
We also have an amazing group of clinicians. Another reason that I like being there is I get to rub elbows with these really smart people. Mm-hmm. We have 2 Harvard graduates on our staff.
Wow.
We have 4 Stanford graduates on our staff.
Wow.
We have a pediatrician who did part of her training at Columbia University in New York City. Wow. So, I mean, these are people of skill, of real talent and skill. Right. And they're doing this because they really want to do community medicine, which is providing care for the most vulnerable in the community.
And that seems like almost a calling. I mean, it's something more than a job.
It's incredibly satisfying. And I think that's what drives people to do that. Yeah. It's just the satisfaction. So when I was in private practice, sometimes the expectations were different than the expectations amongst this group of people. They are delighted that we're available to take care of their diabetes. So they can continue to work their 2 jobs so that they can send money back home to their family in Guatemala. Just
salt of the earth.
It's this partnership with these folks who have some amazing stories of their own. Yeah. Getting here.
And you in there, I mean, you were in private practice for 30 years?
27.
27.
In New Mexico.
So you saw a lot of people.
Yep. I delivered babies. I got to watch them from the beginning to the end.
You delivered babies?
I delivered babies. One of my most pleasant experiences, delivering babies. I got to deliver babies of babies. The first lady I ever delivered had me take care of her when she was pregnant.
Wow.
And that was really satisfying.
There's a long list of things that you've done that I have not done. Delivering babies among them.
Well, here's a secret. Okay. I don't tell everybody this, but delivering babies is not rocket science. The idea is to be there and witness an amazing event. Really? Most of the time.
Most of the time. Right.
Occasionally you have to intervene and help the process along.
Yeah.
But most of the time you gotta catch the baby.
Don't drop it.
Don't drop the baby.
And I want to get back to that, the people side of this in a second, but So talk about the vision, kind of this campaign that I know the Neighborhood Clinics has been in the middle of. There, and I met with you a few months ago, and you kind of explained a little bit of the vision. I'd love for our audience to hear a little bit about kind of what's about to happen.
So we are doing a comprehensive campaign, and the idea behind this comprehensive campaign is threefold. There are three parts to this. First of all, the West Side Clinic, and many of your listeners may know where that is. It's a little tiny house that was built in 1922. There was a little house then. It's been added on to twice. It's still a little house. You can't put two people in a hall at the same time. And it's outgrown itself.
Yeah.
So the first part of the campaign is to raise money to build a larger facility right across the street.
Okay.
We're going to maintain the building we have and try to do more behavioral health services out of that building.
Oh, okay.
But this will be a full service clinic with dental and behavioral health integrated with medical care. So that's one. The second is that we have this gap. Every year we have to raise about $2.5 million that we do not get through the revenue of seeing patients, or the grants that we get from the feds. And so over 5 years, $2.5 million is $10 million.
Real money, right.
So that makes up that part of it. And then we have a small part that we're using to maintain our facilities and to replace aging equipment, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. How much are you raising?
So we're raising $20 million.
Okay.
So $10 million will be to fill a gap. $6.75 million is for the new building. Yeah. And the remainder, $3.25 million for the maintenance.
Okay.
And we're 91% of the
91% of the way. Wow. So do you think like this year? I mean, is it?
Well, I think we're going to, so that pledges, and you know this better than I do, pledges are different than cash in the bank.
Right.
But we have pledges worth 91% of the $20 million.
Wow.
So this is exciting, very exciting.
Yeah.
And the amazing part of this is the folks that we get to run into when we're doing this work in trying to raise these funds.
Yeah.
People who are really interested in having this kind of a facility in the community. Yeah. Because they recognize that you cannot have a healthy community if everybody in your community doesn't have access to good health care. Right. So we're trying to fill that bottom part.
Right. And we're probably learning that more now than ever.
Indeed. Yeah. Indeed.
Yeah. You know, the doctor relationship, and you were a family physician?
Yes.
So that just seems like such a special thing. I remember the doctor that we went to growing up, and I remember the office. I remember and there seems like there's can be such a bond with the family and that doctor. Is that something you experienced?
That was one of the reasons that I selected this. When I went through my training, every rotation I took in a different specialty, I said, oh, that's what I want to be, a neurosurgeon, or I want to be a pediatrician, or I want to be this or that. And then I finally decided the only way I could do all those things is to be a family physician.
Jack of all trades, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's.
But the point you make is really good. You really become a valued member of their family. Yeah. And that was another very, very satisfying part of my career.
Yeah. Do people? I mean, what percentage of the people that walk in the door when you're a family physician are experiencing fear?
Fear of the doctor, or fear of what they might have?
What they might have.
Yes. Well, probably you and I. You may not go to the doctor. You're too healthy. But when I go to the doctor, I'm thinking to myself, so I've had this symptom, which I just read about in the book.
Right.
And here's the list of things that it could be. Right on the top of the list is cancer.
Right. I'm a goner.
So I'm thinking, I've got 4 more days to live.
Right. And especially with the internet. You go on there and you're dying of something, I can guarantee you.
That's right.
Yeah. So you experience that a lot.
Well, you do.
With patients. So you're almost kind of like a counselor, kind of.
Well, counselor and teacher. So I see my role as being a partner with my patient to help them understand what I already know about their disease process or their symptoms, what it might be, and how we would go about determining that. Yeah. Just from my training. And as a generalist, many times I don't know the answer. Yeah. And so I want them to be comfortable that the specialist that I pick is also on their side.
Right.
Somebody that they can trust.
Right. That's really, you strike me as somebody who would have a good bedside manner. Just calming, which I think must be important for that role.
Well, it is, although I can think of a couple of times when I was delivering babies that I got thrown out of the room.
You did?
By the mom.
Oh, really?
That hurts too much. Get out of here.
It wasn't your fault.
It wasn't my fault.
Yeah, wow. And you were in the Navy.
I was.
3 years, and you were in Vietnam.
I was.
And so what was kind of that your early road like from the service into medicine? Tell us about that.
Oh, that's a great question. So I was on river patrol boats, and one of the places that we ended up going, my last tour, was up along the Cambodian border in a little canal. And somebody had left behind a book on tropical medicine. I have no idea how that got left there. But I started reading that at night, and I said, there's probably better things for me to do than, be out here.
On the riverboat?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And so when I got back, I applied to medical school.
So that was really the start of it.
That was really when I decided to do that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. And you were where were you born again? New York?
No, I was born in a little town named Morenci, Arizona. Little mining town.
Okay. And you got some of your education in Connecticut or something.
Yeah, then my dad moved up in the company, and the head office was back in New York, so I went from a mining town in Arizona to New York City.
Wow.
Talk about a culture shock.
Yeah, big one. Let's talk about COVID and kind of this experience that we've all been in, and maybe even a little bit about kind of the current. I know in the last few days there's been a little bit of a spike, but kind of talk about what you've seen, where we are in your opinion, and what people should know.
That's a great question, very broad question, but a great question. Thank you. So we in Santa Barbara have been quite fortunate. I think the governor very early on said, here's what you have to do. You have to, you have to isolate. And you have to wash your hands, and you got to do your 6 foot. We didn't understand masks yet. And you got to wash your hands a lot, and and don't touch your eyes and your nose and your mouth with your hands. And that was kind of what we taught people. Cough into your sleeve. That was the stuff. So doing all that stuff, we were able to what they call flatten the curve. So if this thing had been allowed to just take its own course, we would have seen this incredible spike, and it would have overwhelmed our healthcare system. There wouldn't have been enough hospital beds. There wouldn't have been enough. Well, we saw this in New York. There wouldn't have been enough ventilators. The personal protective equipment would have run out. So thanks to our governor and maybe our geography, we had a relatively mild. We still had people die. We had 29 people die, but relatively mild compared to other places. But now that we've sort of opened up, I think some of us are sort of forgetting what we learned and how we got to where we are now with this social distancing. And now we really understand that the Chinese and the South Koreans and the Japanese really do understand the value of masks. I can remember watching an interview early on with a person from an infectious disease expert from South Korea. And he said, I really don't understand why the Americans are so opposed to masks. But that's all he said. And at that time we were. And then now the data really shows us that even though the transmission of this disease is primarily droplets, meaning that I'm talking to you, so I'm spewing droplets out, but the droplets are heavy enough that they will drop pretty much about 3 feet away from me. So that if we double that, then that gets to the 6 feet. And that's the reason for that. But there are some particles that may stay in the air, particularly if you're inside. If you're outside, the wind's going to carry that all away, and so you're probably safer outside than you are inside. But we look at some of these experiences people have had. The little church in South Korea, that they had a weekend, a 3-day weekend, where they met and didn't leave their I guess we're in a church. They had the windows closed. It was wintertime. South Korea gets cold. and they had a huge spike in the number of infections.
Wow.
We have just seen this in Oregon just this last week. Another little church, 236 people are infected now.
Wow.
Because of their choir. So when you sing, that sends these droplets way out farther. And if you're not protecting yourself, if we don't protect each other, the value of the masks is that if I wear a mask, I'm protecting you from what I don't know I have.
Right.
If you wear an N95, then you may get some protection. I may get some protection from you as well. But just the face covering keeps these droplets and the shedding viruses from getting into the air and then traveling over to you.
So it's because we've heard, obviously there's been a lot of conflicting information at different times, but so is it on counters? Does it stay on counters?
So that's called
surfaces?
fomites. So fomite transmission is that the droplet will fall to the counter.
Yeah.
Now this virus is really fragile, and so it doesn't stay in a viable state very long. You may be able to pick up RNA from its remains, but it may not be reproducible. It may not be replicable, we call it, for very long from the counter. You may be able to, so remember the news about the ship, and they went on 28 days later and they still recovered virus from the flat surfaces there. But those may be just remnants of a culturable virus, a virus that's able to replicate. This virus really needs us to do that. And if it doesn't have us, then it's going to die fairly rapidly. Die is a bad word. It's a string of RNA is what it is.
Okay.
And its only function is to replicate.
So if you get your mail, do you still have to wipe the mail down?
So that's a really good question.
We've been wiping our mail for weeks.
The reason I gave you a funny look is because I don't wipe my mail down. I'm thinking to myself, oh gosh, what's the right answer to this?
Tell me. Costco, do we have to leave our groceries in the garage for 3 days? I mean, what do we do?
I think that's a really good point, actually. So the answer to that is probably not. The transmission from fomite is probably very rare.
Okay.
Aerosols, more so, particularly if you're in an environment that produces a lot of aerosols. So in our organization, we have dentists. And we have really skilled dentists, I have to say. In fact, we may have the best dentists in Santa Barbara. I don't want to offend anybody. But whenever they clean your teeth with these high-speed instruments, and with that water and with the ultrasound, they just shoot this stuff all over.
Right.
And so they, of course, are really worried about what do we do. Right. So here's what we're planning. Right now, we have some open areas where we have 5 chairs in a big long room. So we're going to separate all those chairs with a glass wall. We are installing scrubbers in our HVAC systems, and there are outlets right there between each of the chairs. So we'll just, the glass wall will go over that, and then so the scrubbers will remove the air containing the aerosols. And we also have this device that Dr. Calore found. He's our chief dental officer. And we'll have one of those for each operatory, which is a suction device that kind of sits right here, out of the way of the surgeon, but close enough that it can suck up all the stuff coming out. And then it takes it into a little canister where it sprays that with hydrogen peroxide, which has been superheated to steam and kill the viruses. And that's been shown to be very effective.
Yeah. Wow.
And so that's what we're doing, along with all the stuff that we've already been doing, which is screening everybody who comes in with a set of questions. We take their temperature, and if the questions are positive, and if the temperature is high, then they get assigned to a different part of the day, where we have people in their personal protective equipment, and we'll then examine them, and if necessary, do the COVID test. But if people are in for their diabetes and their answer to the questions are all negative and they don't have a temperature, then we'll see them at the beginning part of the day when it's safe, after the cleaning crews have been through and cleaned up the area. We've separated all of our chairs in the reception area by 6 feet. And if there's not room for you there, then we ask you to wait in your car until one opens up.
Yeah.
Everybody wears masks. All of our staff's wearing masks. The people who come in wear masks.
How long does this go on? I mean, are we talking about the rest of the year of this heavy?
This is a really tough question. It's a really good question because that's it. We want to know that.
Right.
And we don't know yet. So this little spike, I just left a conference with some of our infectious disease people, and they are really worried about this little spike. And what they're worried about is the spike in hospitalizations.
Right, I saw that.
So if you sort of think about this objectively, the spike in new cases may be related to the fact that we're testing more.
Right.
So we don't know. It's called the denominator effect.
Yeah.
But
more
people who get sick enough to come to the hospital is totally related to the virus.
Right.
And so if we're seeing a spike in the number of people that are ending up at the hospital,
right.
That's worrisome. And the steeper the spike, the more worrisome that it is.
Right. I just want to touch my face again.
And you can't
Someday.
You can't not touch your face.
I'm longing to touch my face.
And
join a choir. I need to join a choir. I can't join a choir.
Yeah.
You just told me. Choirs, no good. No choirs.
So I'm wondering. So maybe you could have the hymns that you sang last year playing in the background,
right?
And you can pantomime.
Right, great idea. That'd be better than me singing.
Well, yeah, I was the one who was asked not to sing.
Yeah, I've never been asked to join a choir, actually. The vulnerable population. I mean, I know there's been some impact, and I've heard statistically that the impact's been greater in these vulnerable communities. Have
Yes.
you guys seen a lot of that?
Yes, the Hispanic population, Latinos and Latinx. If you look at the graphs comparing the concentration in the state, the population in the state, the percentage of the population in the state, against the percentage who get the disease, I think it's 33.9% or 36.9% Latinos in California, and it's something like 54% of the infections. And so and that group is particularly vulnerable for a couple of reasons. One is many of them are holding down two jobs. Many of them are living two families in an apartment.
Right. Space.
And many of them are working in jobs where they're really at risk. So the grocery stores.
Right. A lot of people have sacrificed personal safety to serve at grocery stores.
Really?
Farmers. I mean, that's really something that we need to remember.
I think that's very important.
Testing, just real quick, we only have a couple minutes left, but in terms of testing, because again, you hear all these different things. It takes 3 days, it takes 5 minutes, I can order it in the mail. If somebody wants to get tested today, what do they do? And can they? Should they?
Yes. So if they want to be tested today, if they have symptoms, you go to your family doc and he will get you tested.
Okay.
Well, the way we do it is that you call a number, and that gets you to our call center. Our call center will interview you, just do a brief screening, and if you have symptoms that could be COVID, then you're assigned to a certain part of the day, and we will examine you and we will test you if necessary.
Okay.
If you don't have any symptoms, you're just curious, then the county has set up a testing site at Earl Warren Fairgrounds.
Oh, really?
And that's free to everybody.
Huh.
It's supported by the state.
Now, does that show you if you've had it 6 weeks ago?
No. So that's a different set of testing. So
okay.
Good question. There are two kinds of tests. There's the Pcr Molecular Test that tells you if you're carrying the virus or RNA from the virus today.
Okay.
And that put the swab down into your what's called a nasopharynx, and it's sort of unpleasant.
Yeah.
And don't touch your eye. And that tells you if you have the virus.
Okay.
If you want to know if you had the virus 6 weeks ago, so you want to do what's called an antibody test.
Okay.
And that's to see if you formed antibodies against the virus. And those tests now have become quite sophisticated. And the testing platforms that are available in Santa Barbara now we're quite comfortable that they are testing the COVID-19 virus. The problem early on was that there are a number of COVID viruses.
Ah.
Most of us have antibodies to them because they cause a common cold, and we had them from as long as we've been around. And the early tests.
So that's where there was false positives.
That's why there were the false positives.
Yeah. Okay.
But now that the platforms are so what we're doing here is we're doing sort of it's called octagonal performance. So we have one platform that tests for one part of the antibody, and a second platform that tests for another part of the antibody, and we combine them.
Ah.
And so if this one is 98%
right.
Sensitive, and this one is 95% sensitive, and you combine the two of them, you get a positive predicted value of 100%.
Yeah.
And the same is true with the negative predictive value. So if I tell you that you've never had the virus after doing these two tests, then you could be pretty comfortable that you've never had the virus.
Yeah.
Or if I tell you that you have a positive test, you have antibodies against this, that tells you that you had the virus.
Yeah.
It doesn't tell you if you're protected. We don't have that level of sophistication yet. There are a number of different kind of antibodies, but the antibodies that we're interested in are the so-called neutralizing antibodies, the killer antibodies, the antibody that's going to kill that virus. And we don't know if what we're testing is a helper antibody or a neutralizing antibody, which is the killer antibody.
Huh.
So that's coming next.
When will we know that?
It's on the way. I don't know. I can't give you a number.
No.
But,
now, one more question about that test. How far back would that go? If I want to know if I've had the virus, but it was 8 weeks ago, it was 10 weeks, how far back
That's another really good question, and we don't know the answer to that yet either. We don't know how long those antibodies will last in your body.
Okay.
So we're 4 months into this, right? Or 5 months into this now.
Right.
And so we don't have a long track record to be able to go back and say, well, these people had antibodies in Wuhan in November.
They're still
and they still have them.
Right.
That's good.
Yeah.
And that's what it looks like is happening.
Right.
What we are finding, though, is that the antibodies, you haven't asked me about vaccines yet, but we have found that the vaccines that they're now in production, there's 5 of them or more as of today, are producing antibodies, which are neutralizing antibodies that are higher concentration than people who've recovered from COVID. And so that's really encouraging.
Yeah. And timeline on vaccine?
So the AstraZeneca vaccine that's being produced with Oxford in England, they're talking about having 20 million doses available in September. Now, that seems really fast to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey.
But the other question, and this is what we were talking about at this noon meeting I had, was how are we going to get all these people vaccinated? How are we going to do that? So we want to get everybody vaccinated against flu, because flu season and COVID season are going to overlap.
Right.
And the symptoms are very similar. And so how are we going to know the difference? And what happens to people that have both?
Right.
You know, is that a worse thing? I bet it is.
Yeah.
And so
wow.
we want to get as many people vaccinated against the influenza virus as possible.
Right.
So we're trying to gear up to get people interested in getting their vaccines.
And when would you suggest somebody gets vaccinated?
They're recommending that we get started in August.
August.
So usually we say the end of September, beginning of October, so you can last for the whole year. Now we're saying let's get started in August and get as many people vaccinated as we can. And
against
then if we
influenza.
have to do a second shot, great.
Yeah, against influenza.
Against influenza.
And then
potentially when COVID vaccine comes out, let's get that in.
Ah, I see. Wow. Good times.
A lot to do.
Good times.
A lot to do.
I remember when I used to think about the Lakers, touching my face.
That's true, yeah.
Dr. Fenzi, thank you. If you want to meet Dr. Fenzi, December 15th, I know where he'll be with us, the Rosewood Miramar. We're looking forward to honoring you.
So honored.
Well, we're looking forward to honoring you, and folks can find out about that because it's going to be a special night. And we're thankful for you in our community. And if I ever get sick, I think I'm going to call you.
Come on over.
Yeah, I will. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you.
We'll see you next time.